Most people assume the dark is empty, but I know better than most. It started when I was 7, in a house that felt too large for our family. My bedroom had a long hallway leading to it, always draped in deep, heavy shadows. One night, the light from the street lamp caught something standing right by my door. It wasn't a person. It was a void, a human-shaped hole cut out of the air. It didn't have eyes or a mouth, just a static, vibrating density that felt cold. I stared at it for what felt like hours, unable to scream or move my limbs. It just stood there, swaying slightly, as if it were breathing, but without making a sound. When I finally blinked, the space was empty, but the temperature remained freezing. That was the first time I realized that some shadows don't need a light source. My parents told me it was just an overactive imagination, fueled by the dark. They didn't see the way the corners of the ceiling seemed to drip blackness. I started leaving my closet light on, hoping the glare would burn the entities away. But the Shadow Man didn't care about the light. He lived in the contrast. I would see him in the reflection of the TV screen after I turned it off. He was always taller than a man should be, stretching up toward the crown molding. One night, I heard a sound like dry autumn leaves skittering across my hardwood floor. I looked down and saw a pair of elongated, ink-black fingers curling around my bed frame. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that felt like it would break me. I pulled the covers over my head, but I could still feel his presence looming. Years later, I thought I had left those childhood nightmares in that old house. I was working late at a law firm in downtown Chicago, alone on the floor. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting long, rhythmic pulses of shadow across the cubicles. While walking to the break room, I saw a figure standing by the heavy water cooler. It was the same silhouette, darker than the night outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. It didn't move, even when I dropped my ceramic mug, shattering it on the tile. I stood frozen, watching as the shadow seemed to absorb the light around it. The temperature in the room plummeted until I could see my own trembling breath. Then, it turned its head toward me, a slow, mechanical movement that felt wrong. I didn't wait for it to speak. I ran for the elevator and never went back. Driving home that night, I kept checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. The rain was coming down in sheets, blurring the world into gray and black. On a desolate stretch of the I-90, I saw him standing on the shoulder. He was perfectly still, unaffected by the wind or the spray from my tires. As my headlights hit him, he didn't cast a shadow. He was the shadow. My car suddenly sputtered, the engine dying as if something had drained the battery. I rolled to a stop in the pitch black, the silence of the woods pressing in. In the mirror, I saw the figure walking toward my car with a jagged gait. He was moving faster than a human, gliding across the wet pavement like oil. I fumbled for my keys, screaming as his hand reached for the glass door. Many people report seeing the same entity, a tall figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat. This isn't just a local myth. It is a global phenomenon, reported by thousands. My friend in London saw him standing at the foot of her bed last June. She described him as a gentleman of darkness, watching with an invisible gaze. He doesn't move or speak. He simply observes, radiating a sense of ancient malice. Some believe he is a collector of souls, waiting for a moment of true weakness. Others say he is a guardian of the threshold between our world and theirs. When he appears, the air becomes thick, making it nearly impossible to breathe. You feel a weight on your chest, a pressure that feels like a physical hand. The Hat Man is the most terrifying because he seems to have a specific
My brother recently moved into a renovated basement apartment in a Victorian house. He called me at 3 in the morning, his voice shaking with pure, unadulterated terror. He said he had been doing laundry when he felt something watching from the furnace. When he turned his flashlight toward the corner, he saw a cluster of shadows. They were small at first, like children, huddled together in the damp concrete. But then they began to merge, flowing into each other like spilled ink on paper. A single, massive entity rose up, its head brushing against the low-hanging pipes. It didn't have a face, but he could feel its hunger through the cold air. He left everything behind, his clothes, his phone, his pride, and just ran outside. He hasn't slept in a room without 3 different lamps turned on since then. Hospitals are places of life and death, but mostly they are places of shadows. A nurse in Tokyo told me about the figure she saw in the palliative wing. It would sit in the corner of rooms where patients were nearing their final breath. The staff called it the visitor, a silent companion for the departing souls. One night, she saw it standing over a young man who was expected to recover. The shadow didn't just sit, it was leaning down, whispering into the patient's ear. She entered the room to intervene, but the air turned to ice as she approached. The shadow looked up, and for a second, she saw 2 faint, glowing white pinpricks. By the time she turned on the overhead light, the entity had vanished entirely. The young man passed away an hour later from a sudden, unexplained cardiac arrest. The most common encounter happens in the liminal space between waking and sleeping. You wake up, but your body is a lead weight, pinned to the mattress by gravity. That's when you see the shadow man standing in the corner of your vision. He inches closer with every heartbeat, his form flickering like a bad film wheel. You try to scream, but your throat is paralyzed, your voice trapped in your chest. He reaches out a long, spindly arm, the fingers trailing over your cold skin. The dread is so intense it feels like a physical blow to your internal organs. He leans in close, his non-face hovering just inches from your own terrified eyes. You can smell something like ozone and rotting meat coming from the void. Just as he touches your lips, you snap awake, gasping for air in the dark.
It's even worse when you realize there isn't just one of these dark entities. In a small village in Norway, an entire family reported seeing them together. They would stand in the tree line behind the house, dozens of black silhouettes. They never entered the light of the porch, but they paced the perimeter constantly. The father described it as a siege, as if they were waiting for the power. One night, the transformer blew, plunging the entire valley into absolute darkness. The family huddled in the living room, listening to the sound of scratching glass. Shadows were pressing against every window, their forms blurring the glass panes. They didn't break in, they just watched, a silent army of ink and malice. When the sun rose, the family found hundreds of handprints on the exterior walls. You might think you're safe because you haven't seen one in a long time, but the shadow men don't just go away. They simply move to the periphery. They are in the corner of your eye when you're walking down a hallway. They are the reason you feel a sudden chill in a room with the heater on. Once they have noticed you, they never truly stop watching your every move. I still see the one from my childhood, standing in the reflection of my mirror. He's older now, or maybe I am just more aware of his ancient dark weight. I've learned to live with the fear, but I never sleep with my back to the door, because I know that one night, the shadow won't just stay in the corner. It will finally step forward and reclaim the space it has been occupying. Some scientists claim it's all in our heads, a trick of the brain's hardware. They point to infrasound,
low-frequency vibrations that the human ear can't hear. These frequencies can vibrate the fluid in our eyes, creating peripheral hallucinations. Or they blame electromagnetic fields that disrupt the temporal lobe's normal function. But that doesn't explain why thousands of people see the exact same thing. It doesn't explain why pets growl at empty corners before the shadows appear. If it's just a glitch, why does the glitch have a personality of its own? Why does it feel like a predatory gaze is physically pressing against your skin? Maybe these frequencies aren't the cause, but the doorway they use to enter. A bridge built of sound and static that lets the darkness cross into our world.
Among these entities, one figure stands out across every culture and continent. He is known as the Hat Man, a silhouette wearing a wide-brimmed fedora. He doesn't skulk in the corners like the others. He stands boldly. People in Japan, Brazil, and Canada describe him with terrifyingly identical detail. He wears a long trench coat that seems to absorb the light around it. Unlike the blurry shadows, the Hat Man feels solid, three-dimensional, and ancient. He often appears during bouts of sleep paralysis, standing at the foot of the bed. He doesn't move, he doesn't speak, he just projects a sense of profound malice. Some say he is the leader, the architect of the shadow realm we fear. When he shows up, it means the regular shadows have finished their scouting. I spoke to a woman from Sydney who saw him every night for a month. She said he would get closer by exactly 1 foot every single time. By the third week, he was standing directly over her as she lay paralyzed. She could see the texture of his coat, like black smoke woven into fabric. He didn't have eyes, yet she felt him staring into the deepest parts of her soul. The air in the room would drop 10 degrees whenever he manifested his presence. She tried to pray, but the words turned to ash in her paralyzed mouth. On the final night, he reached down and placed a hand on her chest. She said it felt like a block of dry ice was being pressed into her heart. When she finally woke up, there was a faint, soot-colored bruise on her skin. Modern technology has only made it harder to ignore the reality of them. Smart doorbells and security cameras are constantly picking up phantom motion alerts. You check your phone at 3 a.m. to see a dark shape on your porch. The camera tracks it as it moves with a fluid, unnatural gait toward the door. You look through the peephole and see absolutely nothing but the empty street. But on the digital screen, the figure is right there, staring back at you. It's as if digital sensors can see a spectrum of light we've evolved to ignore. These recordings show them walking through walls or dissolving into the floorboards. They aren't ghosts of the dead. They are something that has never been alive. They are the background noise of the universe, finally being caught on film. As you sit here listening to this, take a moment to look around. The human eye is designed to detect movement in the periphery for survival. That slight flicker you just saw near the doorway probably wasn't a trick. The shadow men thrive on the attention you give them, feeding them a fear. Every time you think of them, you're inadvertently sending out a silent